Morning in Rose Creek began slowly. The sun's rays fell softly on the ground, illuminating the ripples on the water of the small pond near Jacob's farm. He stood on the porch, holding a mug of cooled coffee. The wind whispered quietly through the grass, and at that moment, Jacob felt an emptiness that nothing could fill. Martha, his wife, was now just a memory. She always greeted him with a smile, a quiet, "Good morning," and the smell of her fresh bread filled the house with warmth. But now, the house was empty. Only the quiet creak of the floor under his son's feet reminded him that someone else still needed care. Jacob knelt before Martha's grave, which had just been dug under the old oak tree. He ran his hand over the cold earth, feeling every grain merge with his pain. He remembered how she laughed when they cooked dinner together, how she held their son's hand when he was learning to walk, how she whispered quietly in his ear, "Everything will be all right." Tears flowed on their own, without any will. Jacob felt that with every drop, his heart tightened, and with it, a part of his soul was leaving. He heard the whisper of the wind, which seemed like Martha's voice, a reminder that she was gone. "I never thought I could feel such emptiness," he thought. The residents of Rose Creek approached the grave one by one. Some whispered words of condolence quietly, others simply bowed their heads and left. No one dared to speak about what everyone knew. The bandits would return, and no one would be able to stop them. Jacob noticed their glances, a mixture of pity and fear, and understood that now he was alone in his pain and in his future revenge. He stayed by the grave until the sun began to set on the horizon. Slowly, step by step, he returned home, feeling the heaviness of every movement. That day, he had buried not only his wife, but also his former life. The life that had coziness, laughter, and peace. Now there was only emptiness, resolve, and the path of revenge that was just beginning. Evening descended upon Jacob's farm. The sun was gradually hiding behind the horizon, painting the sky in warm shades of orange and pink. The house was quiet, only the slight creak of the wooden floor under Jacob's feet breaking this silence. He entered the old room where the chest that had belonged to his father was kept. His heart was pounding, his breath becoming ragged. Jacob opened the chest and saw inside an old but well-kept revolver. The metal felt cold in his hands, sending a chill into his fingers. He slowly ran his hand over it, checking the hammer, the barrel, the grip. He had never held a weapon to kill people before, only for hunting, to protect against wild animals, or out of necessity. Now everything was different. He sat on the edge of a wooden chair, holding the revolver on his knees, and his thoughts raced between fear and resolve. "I can't. No, I must," he whispered to himself. He remembered Martha, her smile, her soft voice, the warmth of her hands. Each memory burned hotter than any pain. Each memory pushed him forward. Jacob took the cartridges from the chest, carefully loading the revolver. He pictured the bandits, their faces, the laughter that echoed in his nightmares. His hands were trembling, but this tremor wasn't just from fear. There was resolve in it. He saw every scene before him in minute detail: the bandits' camp, the fire, the occasional sparks, their weapons, their carelessness. A sense of responsibility grew inside Jacob. He knew no one else could do what he had to do. He wasn't seeking glory. He didn't want to be a hero. He wanted only one thing: to get revenge, to restore at least a small measure of justice, to reclaim Martha's honor. When he raised his head, the dark room seemed almost empty. Moonlight streamed through the window, softly illuminating the dust in the air. Jacob took a deep breath. He stood up, gripping the revolver tightly in his hand. The decision was made. Tomorrow his path would begin, a path through the desert, a path to those who had destroyed his life. And no fatigue, no fear could stop him. Early in the morning, Jacob saddled his horse. The sun was barely rising above the horizon, painting the prairies in soft shades of pink and gold. The wind played with his cloak, raising dust from the dry ground. Every movement of the horse seemed slow, yet tense. Jacob felt every muscle of the animal, every rustle, every breath of the wind. The road to the Mexican border was long and deserted. Dusty trails, sparse bushes, and lonely hills created a feeling that the world had disappeared, leaving him alone with his pain and anger. The sun scorched his skin by day, and at night the cold pierced to the bone, making him shiver even under his cloak. Jacob stopped at every rest, sipping water from his canteen, checking his revolver and cartridges, listening to the sounds of the surrounding silence. The wind brought with it strange sounds, the creak of branches, the distant howl of a coyote, the rustle of grass. Every sound reminded him of potential danger. Every rustle made his heart beat faster. But with this, every memory of Martha gave him the strength to go on. He remembered how she cooked dinner, laughed, held their son's hand. These images mixed with thoughts of revenge, pushing him forward through the desert, through fatigue, through pain. At night, Jacob stopped for a short rest. He built a small fire to warm himself and watched as the sparks rose to the sky. The flames reflected in his eyes, and he saw Martha's face again. Tears mixed with dust, but there was no weakness in them, only resolve. "I will reach them. I will do it for you," he whispered, holding the revolver on his knees and listening to the silence of the desert night. Each day was a trial: the scorching sun, scarce water, fatigue, pain in his back and shoulders. But with every mile passed, Jacob grew stronger, his resolve hardened, and the memory of Martha became a light that led him forward, through the endless expanses of the prairie, towards the vengeance that awaited him in the south. After several days on the trail, Jacob finally caught up with the gang's tracks. The old stone hills and dilapidated mine structures looked dead against the sunset sky. The gang had stopped here, setting up a temporary camp. Jacob hid behind a rocky ridge on the hill, his heart pounding so loudly it felt like the outlaws could hear every beat. The firelight cast a warm glow on the outlaws' faces. They were laughing, drinking, and dividing their loot. Jacob studied each one carefully, their weapons, their movements, their habits. His fingers tightened around the revolver. His breathing was steady but tense. Every moment he absorbed the details: who was closer to the fire, who was on guard, who was unaware of his presence. Inside Jacob, memories of Martha churned. She stood on the porch of their house, laughing, cooking dinner, talking quietly with their son. These images surfaced in his mind, mixing with adrenaline and resolve. "I will do this for her," he repeated to himself. He moved slowly along the hill, trying not to make a sound, listening to the wind and every rustle. His eyes tracked every movement of the outlaws, analyzing their positions, weaknesses, and opportunities. In that moment, he understood that the decision for revenge was now irreversible. The night was drawing to a close, and the fire in the camp had almost died out. Only occasional embers illuminated the outlaws. Jacob prepared for action. His fingers gripped the revolver tightly, his breathing even, his heart full of determination. Every moment of silence stretched into an eternity. The wind whistled through the rocks, the rustling grass sounded like enemy footsteps, and Jacob knew that this night would be decisive. He sat behind the rocks, watching the outlaws' shadows fall upon the ground, preparing for the life and death game that would begin with the fall of darkness. And only one thought echoed in his head: "No one can stop me now." Night enveloped the gang's camp in a dark veil. The fire had almost died out, only occasional sparks flared up, illuminating the faces of the outlaws. Jacob took a deep breath, smelling the smoke, dust, and dry grass. His fingers gripped the revolver tightly. His heart beat so loudly it seemed to echo off the rocks. He took the first step, moving closer to the camp, using rocks and bushes as cover. Every movement was cautious, Every crack of a twig or rustle of sand could give him away. But the anger and pain boiling in his soul gave him resolve. He thought of Martha, of her smile, of the fact that she would never again greet him on the doorstep of their home. The first shot rang out, cutting through the silence of the night. The bullet hit one of the outlaws squarely in the chest, and he fell without even a cry. The others jumped up, grabbing their weapons. The shootout began. Jacob hid behind the rocks, firing from cover. Every shot was accompanied by a flash of fire from the barrel and the sound of tearing metal. A second bullet took down another outlaw, a third. 2 remained. One of them fired at Jacob. The bullet tore through his shoulder, ripping his shirt and leaving a burn on his skin. Blood mixed with dust, but the pain only fueled his determination. He clenched his teeth, thinking not of fear, only of revenge. Jacob moved slowly but precisely. Every shot was calculated, every pause a moment to analyze the opponent's next move. The camp descended into chaos. Shouts and the sounds of falling bodies mixed with the crackling of the dying fire and the rustle of the wind. But Jacob knew he was close to his goal. With every outlaw struck down, his anger grew stronger, and his resolve became unshakable. Dawn painted the sky scarlet and gold. The sandy hills and the old mine were bathed in the soft morning light, giving the scene an almost cinematic effect. Jacob and Clyde stood opposite each other, a few paces apart, their breathing steady, the tension almost tangible. Every movement seemed to slow down, every moment stretched into an eternity. Clyde smirked, squinting in the sun. "You think you can kill me, farmer?" "I don't think," Jacob replied quietly, tightening his grip on the revolver. "I know." The wind played with their clothes, kicking up dust and fine sand. Jacob felt it on his skin, heard every sound. The creak of the mine's wooden planks, the rustle of sand underfoot, the rare cry of a bird in the distance. He saw Clyde's face, remembering every moment this man had destroyed his life, killed Martha, and robbed his family of their peace. The seconds stretched. Time seemed to stop. They slowly raised their weapons, their eyes locked. Jacob took a deep breath, feeling the cold metal of the revolver in his palm, and fired. The bullet flew straight into Clyde's heart. He fell, raising clouds of dust, and a silence, broken only by the soft whistle of the wind, descended upon the mine. Jacob stood motionless, feeling the weight of the moment, as if the whole world had paused, allowing him to understand the price of revenge. The fear and anger that had accompanied him on his entire journey slowly faded. He took a step forward, his breathing even, his eyes still full of memories of Martha. Victory was achieved, but the price was too high. The silence of dawn enveloped him, and for the first time in a long time, Jacob felt that something in this world had been made right again. But he knew life would never be the same, and the memories of those nights, of the pain and loss, would stay with him forever. A week later, Jacob returned to Rose Creek. His horse stepped slowly along the familiar paths. Every mile was hard won. The animal's hooves scraped against the stones, and Jacob felt every ache in his body. His shirt was torn. His shoulders still ached from the wound. His hands trembled. But the same fire that had guided him through the desert burned in his eyes. The residents peered out from their windows. Some hid behind doors, watching the lone man's return. Their glances mixed surprise, fear, and distrust. No one ran out to meet him. No one showered him with praise. Jacob hadn't expected it. He understood. To them, he was just a man who had survived a horror, not a hero, not a legend. He walked slowly down the street, every movement cautious, as if still expecting a new threat. Memories of Martha flooded back. Her laughter, her warmth, her eyes that would never meet his gaze again. These thoughts filled him with both sadness and resolve, to live on, to raise his son, and to preserve what remained of his family. Jacob headed towards the house where his son was waiting. The boy looked anxious yet joyful at the same time to see his father alive. He hugged Jacob, and for the first time, Jacob felt that something in this world was right again. Life on the farm went on, but now every step was a heavy reminder of the road traveled, of the pain, the loss, and the revenge. People whispered about him, telling stories of how one man had managed to destroy an entire gang. But Jacob knew the truth. Revenge hadn't brought Martha back. She remained under the old oak tree, and he was left to live with the memory that justice often comes only through the fury of one man. And yet, returning home, he understood. The path had been traveled, the duty fulfilled, and life, however hard it was, went on. In the evening, Jacob sat on the porch of his house, watching the sunset paint the prairies in warm shades of orange and purple. His son played nearby, and the wind rustled the grass quietly, a reminder that life went on. Jacob took a deep breath, feeling the pain and fatigue mixed with relief. He thought about Martha, about her smile, about the fact that he would never hear her voice again. The revenge had been carried out, but it had not brought back what was lost, had not restored the warmth of the home he had loved so much. He knew that justice in the Wild West often came only through the fury and determination of one person, and that the price of that justice was always too high. Gazing at the sunset, Jacob realized that his path was different now. He wasn't seeking glory, he wasn't a hero. He was a man who had lost everything, and yet found the strength to carry on. Every memory of Martha, every whisper of the wind over the prairies, every smile from his son, all of it became a new foundation for life. In that moment, Jacob felt that only resolve remained in his heart, the resolve to live on, to raise his son, and to preserve the memory of what truly mattered. The revenge was over, but the lesson remained. Justice rarely comes on its own, and everyone chooses their own path to it. Silence fell over the farm, only the wind and the sounds of the prairie reminding him of the eternal movement of life. And Jacob knew, despite the loss, despite the pain, he was still alive, and the journey continued.